"Please save my sister first," a poor girl asks Billionaire. What he did next made her cry. The blizzard did not fall, it attacked. The wind howled through the narrow cobblestone streets of the old city, driving shards of ice sideways against the darkened storefronts. It was a night where the cold felt personal, a biting living entity seeking out any warmth to extinguish. Inside the cabin of the obsidian-black Rolls-Royce Phantom, however, the world was silent and temperature-controlled to a precise 70 degrees. The smell of hand-stitched leather and expensive cologne filled the air, creating a hermetically sealed bubble of wealth moving through the chaos. Alexander Sterling sat in the back, staring out the tinted window with eyes that were colder than the storm outside. At 35, Alexander possessed everything a man could theoretically want: a global shipping empire, a face that graced the covers of business magazines, and a bank account that grew by the second. Yet he adjusted his silk tie with a weary, almost robotic motion. The charity gala he had just departed had been suffocating. Hundreds of people smiling at him, shaking his hand, not because they liked him, but because they feared him or wanted something from him. "The weather is turning aggressive, sir," Arthur said from the driver's seat. His voice was calm, the voice of a man who had served the Sterling family for 40 years. "Visibility is near zero." "Just get us home, Arthur," Alexander replied, his voice a deep baritone stripped of emotion. "I've had enough of humanity for one night." The car glided forward, the golden spirit of ecstasy emblem on the hood, cutting through the swirling white vortex. They turned down a narrow shortcut, a street lined with centuries-old brick buildings that looked like teeth rotting in the mouth of the city. The streetlights flickered, fighting a losing battle against the heavy snow. Suddenly, Arthur slammed on the brakes. The heavy luxury car skid slightly before coming to a smooth, controlled halt. Alexander frowned, looking up from his phone. "Arthur, I said I wanted to get home, not sightsee. I think I saw something, sir. In the snowbank." Arthur squinted through the windshield, the wipers slashing frantically back and forth. Alexander peered out. At first, he saw nothing but the relentless white and the dirty grey of the slush. Then he saw a patch of colour, a shocking, ragged pink against the monochrome world. It was moving. "It's a dog," Alexander muttered, reaching for the door handle with a sigh of irritation. "Probably freezing. Let's call animal control and move on." But as he opened the heavy rear door, the roar of the wind assaulted him, carrying with it a sound that cut through the gale. It wasn't a bark. It was a sob, a high-pitched, desperate sound of human misery. Alexander stepped out. The snow instantly coated his Italian leather shoes and dusted the shoulders of his deep blue bespoke suit. He squinted against the wind. Crouched near a frozen fire hydrant, half buried in a drift, was a girl. She couldn't have been more than 8 years old. She wore a winter coat that was a tragic joke, a thin, pink, synthetic thing with the stuffing falling out of torn seams, stained with grime and wet with melted snow. Her legs were bare beneath a skirt that was too short, her skin a terrifying shade of mottled purple and blue. She wasn't alone. As Alexander approached, the snow crunching loudly under his feet, the girl looked up. Her face was streaked with dirt and frozen tears, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and fierce determination. In her arms, she clutched a bundle wrapped in a filthy light blue blanket. She was rocking back and forth, shielding the bundle with her own body, taking the brunt of the wind to protect whatever was inside. Alexander froze. He had expected a beggar asking for coins. He had expected a drunk. He had not expected this vision of absolute destitution. "Hey," Alexander said, his voice surprisingly loud in the wind. "You can't be here. It's 20 below zero." The girl didn't ask for money. She didn't look at his expensive watch or the shiny car. She looked him straight in the eyes, her teeth chattering so hard he could hear the clicking sound over the wind. She struggled to stand, her frozen limbs protesting, but she managed to get to her feet. She took a step toward him, not to beg, but to offer. She thrust the blue bundle toward him. Alexander recoiled instinctively. Inside the dirty blanket, a tiny, pale face was visible. An infant. The baby was terrifyingly still, its lips a pale blue, its eyes closed. "Please," the girl rasped. Her voice was broken, raw from screaming into the wind. "Please save my sister first." Alexander stared at her, stunned. "I can wait," the girl continued, tears freezing on her cheeks. She pushed the baby toward his chest, her small, dirty hands trembling violently. "I can wait in the cold. I'm big. I'm strong. But Rose, she stopped crying an hour ago. She's so cold. Please, mister, take her. Just take her." The words hit Alexander like a physical blow. Save my sister first. In his world of cutthroat business deals and superficial relationships, everyone put themselves first. Everyone had an angle. Yet here, in the freezing gutter, a child who looked like she was minutes away from death was trying to bargain for someone else's life with the only currency she had, her own survival. She thought he would only save one. She was willing to die right there on the pavement if it meant the baby got into the warm car. Alexander looked at the baby, then back at the girl's desperate, pleading blue eyes. He felt a crack in the ice that had encased his heart since his wife died. A memory flashed, his own loss, the silence of a nursery that was never used. He didn't speak. He didn't think. For the first time in years, Alexander Sterling just felt. He dropped to one knee in the slush, ruining the pants of a $5,000 suit without a second thought. He didn't just take the baby. He reached out with both arms and scooped the girl up, bundle and all. She was light, terrifyingly light, like a bird made of hollow bones. She gasped, stiffening in his arms, expecting to be struck or pushed away. "Nobody is waiting in the cold," Alexander growled, his voice thick with an emotion he couldn't name. He turned and strode back to the car. Arthur was already there, holding the door wide open, his face pale with shock. Alexander practically threw himself into the back seat, pulling the girl and the baby into the warmth. "Home, Arthur," Alexander barked, pulling the cashmere throw blanket from the seat and wrapping it frantically around the shivering children. "Drive like the devil is chasing us, and call Dr. Roberts. Tell him to meet us at the door. Now!" The girl, overwhelmed by the sudden heat and the smell of leather, looked up at him with wide, disbelief-filled eyes before her exhaustion finally won. Her head fell against the expensive lapel of his suit, leaving a smear of dirt, and she whispered one last time. She didn't eat since yesterday. Then she passed out. Alexander held them tighter, his heart hammering against his ribs, staring at the rearview mirror as the city faded into a white blur behind them. The Sterling mansion was a masterpiece of Victorian architecture, a sprawling stone fortress that loomed on the outskirts of the city. Usually it stood silent and imposing, a museum where no one really lived. But tonight, the grand foyer was a flurry of chaotic activity that shattered its usual tomb-like stillness. Alexander burst through the double oak doors, carrying Lily. He had learned her name from a faded tag on her coat, while Arthur followed closely behind, cradling the infant Rose with the tenderness of a grandfather. "Mrs. Higgins!" Alexander shouted, his voice echoing off the marble floors and crystal chandelier. "Hot water! Blankets! Soup! Where is Roberts?" Mrs. Higgins, the head housekeeper, a stern woman who usually panicked if a coaster was out of place, came running from the hallway. Her eyes widened as she took in the scene. Her impeccable employer, covered in street slush and grime, holding a filthy, unconscious street child against his chest. "My heavens, Mr. Sterling!" she gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "What has happened?" "Not now," Alexander snapped, bypassing the formalities. "Get the guest room in the east wing ready, the warm one, and get the staff to bring up warm broth. Don't just stand there." Moments later, "Doctor." Roberts arrived, looking disheveled but focused. The next hour was a blur of medical instruments, hushed tones, and the smell of antiseptic cutting through the scent of old wood and wax. Alexander stood in the doorway of the bedroom, leaning against the frame, arms crossed. He had refused to change out of his ruined suit. He needed to see this through. He watched as the doctor examined the baby. "It was close, Alexander," Dr. Roberts said, removing his stethoscope and sighing heavily. "Hypothermia, severe malnutrition, dehydration. Another hour out there and the infant wouldn't have made it. The older girl, she's exhausted, her body is depleted, but she's resilient. She's been running on adrenaline." On the massive four-poster bed, Lily began to stir. The moment her eyes fluttered open, panic seized her. She sat up violently, gasping, her eyes darting around the luxurious room, the velvet curtains, the golden lamps, the soft duvet. It was too much, too alien. "Rose!" she screamed, her voice cracking. "Rose!" "She is safe," Alexander said, stepping forward from the shadows. His voice was softer than anyone in the room had ever heard it. "She is right there." He pointed to a bassinet Dr. Roberts had set up near the fireplace. Lily scrambled out of the bed, ignoring the doctor's protests. She was wearing one of Alexander's oversized T-shirts that Mrs. Higgins had found, which hung on her like a gown. She ran to the bassinet and stared down at her sister. Rose was sleeping peacefully, her color returning, a small IV line taped to her tiny hand. The rhythmic rise and fall of her chest seemed to mesmerize Lily. She reached out a trembling hand and touched the baby's cheek, just to make sure she was real. "She's warm," Lily whispered, a tear slipping down her nose. "Yes," Alexander said, moving closer. "She's warm, and she's fed." Lily turned to look at him. In the warm light of the fire, Alexander saw the true extent of her fragility. Her face was gaunt, her eyes shadowed. Yet she stood with a dignity that shamed him. "Thank you," she said, clutching the side of the bassinet. "I will work to pay you back. I can clean. I know how to wash floors. I'm fast." Alexander felt a tightness in his throat. "You are a child, Lily. You don't work. You rest." "Nothing is free," she replied instantly, a heartbreaking reflex of survival on the streets. "I don't want charity. I earn my keep." Alexander looked at Arthur, who was standing in the corner wiping his eyes with a handkerchief. He looked back at Lily. "We can discuss business later," Alexander said, kneeling so he was at eye level with her. "For now, the deal is that you eat." Mrs. Higgins entered with a silver tray holding 2 bowls of steaming chicken soup and warm, crusty bread. She placed it on a low table near the fire. Lily looked at the food, her stomach giving a loud, ferocious growl that echoed in the quiet room. She looked at Alexander for permission. He nodded. Lily didn't rush. She didn't grab the food like an animal, though she must have been starving. She walked to the table, sat on the rug, and picked up the spoon. She took a small sip, closed her eyes, and shivered. Not from cold, but from the overwhelming sensation of nourishment. Alexander watched her. He realized he was holding his breath. He had eaten at Michelin-star restaurants, attended banquets with royalty, and dined on the finest delicacies the world could offer. Yet watching this little girl eat a simple bowl of soup with such reverence was the most profound meal he had ever witnessed. He retreated to the hallway, needing air. He walked down to the main dining room. The table was set for one. The mahogany surface stretched out long and empty, reflecting the cold crystal of the chandelier above. It was perfect. It was silent. It was dead. He looked down at his own reflection in the polished wood. He saw a man who had everything, yet had nothing. "Sir?" Arthur appeared at his elbow. "Shall I have the chef prepare your dinner?" Alexander looked back toward the stairs, toward the east wing, where a faint, soft sound was drifting down. Lily was humming. It was a jagged, broken little melody, a lullaby for her sister. "No, Arthur," Alexander said, loosening his tie and unbuttoning his collar. Bring a bowl of that soup to the guest room. I think I'll eat with my guests tonight." Arthur's face broke into a genuine smile, the wrinkles around his eyes deepening. "Very good, sir. A wise choice." As Alexander walked back up the grand staircase, the ice around his heart didn't just crack. It began to melt. He didn't know it yet, but the thawing of Alexander Sterling had begun. But in the shadows of the mansion, the peace was fragile. Outside the gates, the storm still raged, and unseen forces were already beginning to turn their gaze toward the unexpected intruders in the Sterling home. The warmth was here, but the fire was yet to be tested. The following week at the Sterling mansion was a transformation that bewildered the staff. The silence that had plagued the hallways for years was replaced by the soft, tentative sounds of life. Alexander, a man who strictly worked 14 hours a day, found himself coming home at 5. He claimed it was to check on the investment of their health, but Arthur knew better. Alexander was coming home to hear Lily read aloud from the storybooks he had ordered by the crate load. One evening, Alexander sat in the armchair of the guest room, watching Lily carefully feed Rose a bottle. The baby's cheeks were pink and healthy now, her eyes bright and alert. "She likes you, Mr. Alexander," Lily said softly, burping the infant with practiced ease. "She only smiles at people with good souls. My grandma told me that before she died." Alexander felt a lump form in his throat. "Your grandmother was a wise woman, Lily." Just as the atmosphere settled into a warm, domestic peace, the phone rang. It was the sharp, jarring tone of the dedicated business line. Alexander answered, his face hardening. A crisis at the Singapore shipping hub. Millions were at risk. He had to go immediately. "I'll be back in 48 hours, Alexander told Lily an hour later, standing by the door in his trench coat. He looked anxious, hating to leave. "Mrs. Higgins has instructions. You have everything you need." "We will be fine," Lily said, trying to be brave, though her small hands clutched the hem of her new dress. "Safe travels." As the heavy oak doors closed and the Rolls-Royce pulled away, a different car pulled into the driveway. It was a sleek, red sports car that looked like a predator shark on wheels. Victoria Vance stepped out. She was stunning, impeccably groomed, and possessed a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She breezed past Arthur, stripping off her fur gloves. "Alexander asked me to oversee the household while he deals with his little crisis," Victoria lied smoothly, her heels clicking aggressively on the marble. "I want to inspect the guests." Arthur stiffened. "Mr. Sterling left specific instructions that they were not to be disturbed, Miss Vance. I am his fiancée, Arthur. I don't disturb, I improve." She pushed past him and ascended the stairs. When Victoria entered the guest room, the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Lily stood up instinctively, placing herself between the woman and the crib where Rose slept. Victoria looked around the room, her nose wrinkling as if she smelled something foul. She picked up a teddy bear Alexander had bought, an expensive, hand-stitched antique, and looked at it with disdain before dropping it on the floor. "So," Victoria said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness that barely masked the venom underneath. "You're the little charity case Alexander picked up from the gutter." "My name is Lily," the girl whispered. "I don't care what your name is," Victoria snapped, stepping closer. "Let's get one thing straight. Alexander is suffering from a temporary lapse in judgment. He's grieving, and he's using you as a band-aid. But band-aids get ripped off." She walked to the window and adjusted the thermostat, turning the heat down until the system clicked off. "He will realize his mistake soon," Victoria continued, "and when he does, he'll send you back to the rats. I'm just here to speed up the process." The next 24 hours were a nightmare of psychological warfare. Victoria ordered the kitchen staff to stop sending up special meals, insisting the girls eat standard rations in the kitchen. She criticized Lily's manners, her voice, her very existence. But Lily strong and stubborn, endured it. She could handle mean words. She had heard worse on the streets. Victoria realized she needed something stronger. She needed a crime. On the second evening, while Lily was in the bathroom washing cloths for the baby, Victoria slipped into the room. From her pocket, she pulled a diamond brooch, an heirloom Alexander had given her for their engagement. She moved to the bassinet. With a cruel smirk, she tucked the sparkling jewelry deep inside the folds of the baby's blankets, right next to Rose's sleeping feet. Then she waited. An hour later, Victoria stormed into the room with Mrs. Higgins and 2 security guards in tow. She was acting hysterically, tears streaming down her face. "I know she took it," Victoria screamed, pointing a manicured finger at Lily. "My diamond brooch. I left it on the hallway table, and this little thief swiped it." "I didn't steal anything," Lily cried, her face pale. "I promise. Check my pockets." "Oh, we will check more than your pockets," Victoria hissed. She marched to the crib. "Filthy habits die hard. You probably hid it with the brat." "No, don't touch her." Lily lunged forward, but a security guard held her back gently. Victoria ripped the blankets back, shaking them violently. The heavy diamond brooch fell onto the carpet with a dull thud. The room went silent. Mrs. Higgins gasped, looking at Lily with deep disappointment. "Oh, child, why?" "I didn't," Lily sobbed, struggling against the guard. "She put it there, I swear." Victoria stood up, holding the brooch, her face transforming into a mask of cold triumph. She walked over to Lily and leaned down, whispering so only the girl could hear. "You are a thief, and do you know what happens to thieves who steal from billionaires?" Victoria's eyes bored into Lily's terrified soul. "The police come, and when they come, they don't keep families together. You will go to juvenile detention, and the baby, Rose. She'll go to the state system, a dark, cold room with strangers. You will never see her again." Lily stopped struggling. Her blood ran cold. The threat wasn't about prison. It was about separation. It was her worst nightmare. "Unless," Victoria let the word hang, "unless you leave, tonight, before Alexander gets back. If you're gone, I won't call the police. I won't tell them to come for Rose. But if you're here when I wake up tomorrow, I'm dialing 911. Victoria straightened up and addressed the guards. "Lock them in here for the night. I'll decide whether to press charges in the morning." The door clicked shut. The lock turned. Lily stood in the center of the room, trembling. She looked at Rose, who was sleeping unaware of the danger. The wind howled outside, slapping against the window pane. It was a blizzard again. Leaving meant facing the deathly cold. Staying meant losing Rose to the system. Lily made her choice. She couldn't risk Rose being taken by the police. She had to save her sister. Again. She moved quickly, tears blinding her. She dressed Rose in every layer of warm clothes she could find. She put on her own ragged coat, leaving the beautiful new clothes Alexander had bought behind. She didn't want to be accused of stealing those too. She opened the window. We were on the ground floor. The cold air rushed in, biting and cruel. Lily climbed out, the snow instantly soaking her boots. She reached back in and lifted the carrier with Rose. "I'm sorry, Mr. Alexander," she whispered to the empty room. "I'm so sorry." She disappeared into the white darkness, leaving the warmth of the mansion behind for the freezing unknown. The flight from Singapore had been grueling, but Alexander felt a strange, energetic buzz as the car approached the mansion. He had cut the meeting short, closing the deal in record time, driven by an unfamiliar urge to get home. He had bought a music box at the airport, a delicate thing that played a lullaby. He wanted to see Lily's face when she opened it. But as the Rolls-Royce crunched up the driveway, Alexander frowned. The house looked dark. The welcoming warmth he had grown used to felt absent. He entered the foyer, dropping his briefcase. "Arthur, Mrs. Higgins, I'm back." Silence answered him. Then the click of heels. Victoria appeared at the top of the stairs. She was wearing a black silk robe, holding a glass of wine, looking mournful. "Alexander," she sighed, descending the stairs slowly. "Thank God you're home." "Victoria?" Alexander looked confused. "Where are the girls? Where is Lily?" Victoria stopped on the last step, biting her lip. She reached out to touch his arm. "Oh, darling, I didn't want to tell you over the phone. It's heartbreaking." "What is?" Alexander's voice dropped, a dangerous edge creeping in. "Where are they?" "They're gone, Alexander," Victoria said, shaking her head. "I tried to be welcoming. I really did. But, well, you can take the girl out of the street, but you can't take the street out of the girl." "What are you talking about?" "She stole from us," Victoria said, feigning a sob. "My diamond brooch, the one you gave me. I caught her trying to stash it in her bag. When I confronted her, she became violent. She grabbed the baby and ran off in the middle of the night. I tried to stop her, but she was like a wild animal." Alexander stood frozen. The music box in his pocket felt heavy, like a stone. "She stole? That's impossible." "Is it?" Victoria scoffed gently. "She's a survivalist, darling. She probably saw a chance to make some real money and took it. She used you. I'm so sorry you had to find out like this." Alexander felt a crushing weight in his chest. Betrayal. It tasted bitter and familiar. He had opened his heart and he had been robbed. The ice began to form over his soul again, harder and thicker than before. "I see," Alexander whispered. He turned away, staring at the front door. "I want the security team to file a report. If she stole, she faces the consequences." "I've already handled it," Victoria soothed, rubbing his back. "Let's just forget them. Let's have a drink and—" "Sir." The voice cut through the room like a blade. It was Arthur. The butler stood in the doorway of the library. He wasn't wearing his usual impeccable jacket. His sleeves were rolled up, and he looked furious. In his hand, he held a tablet. "Arthur, not now," Victoria snapped. "Alexander is tired." "Mr. Sterling needs to see this," Arthur said, his voice shaking with suppressed rage. He walked past Victoria, ignoring her completely, and handed the tablet to Alexander. "I took the liberty of reviewing the internal camera logs from the nursery. The system records audio and video continuously." Victoria's face drained of colour. "Arthur, you senile old fool, put that away." "Watch," Arthur commanded, looking Alexander in the eye. Alexander looked down at the screen. He pressed play. The grainy night vision footage showed the guest room. He saw the empty room. Then he saw Victoria enter. He watched, mesmerizingly horrified, as his fiancée looked around, sneered at the teddy bear, and then pulled the diamond brooch from her own pocket. He watched her tuck it into the baby's blanket. Alexander's hand began to tremble. He watched the confrontation. He heard Victoria's voice, crystal clear on the high-end audio system. "You are a thief. The police come. A dark, cold room. You will never see her again." He saw Lily's face, not the face of a criminal, but the face of a terrified sister being cornered by a monster. He heard the blackmail. "Leave, or I take your sister away." The video ended. The silence in the foyer was deafening. It was heavier than the storm outside. Alexander slowly looked up from the tablet. His eyes were no longer cold. They were burning with a terrifying volcanic heat. He looked at Victoria, who was backing away, her hands trembling. "Alexander, wait, I can explain," she stammered. "It was a test. I wanted to see if she was honest. I was protecting you." "You planted evidence." Alexander's voice was a low growl, vibrating in his chest. "You threatened a child. You terrorized an 8-year-old girl and forced her into a blizzard with an infant." "She's just a street rat," Victoria shrieked, her mask falling completely. "She doesn't belong here. I did it for us." Alexander stepped forward. The movement was so sudden and aggressive that Victoria flinched. "There is no us," Alexander said. The words were final, like a gavel striking sound. "Get out of my house." "But—" "Get out!" Alexander roared, the sound echoing off the vaulted ceiling, shaking the glass in the windows. "If you are not gone in 2 minutes, I will have security throw you out into the snow, just like you forced them to go." Victoria stared at him, realized the extent of his fury, and fled. She didn't even pack. She grabbed her purse and ran out the front door, the heavy wood slamming behind her. Alexander didn't watch her go. He turned to Arthur. "How long?" Alexander asked, his voice cracking. "How long have they been gone?" "4 hours, sir," Arthur said, his face pale. "I checked the window sensors. They left around 9 p.m. Alexander spun around and looked out the window. The storm was worse than the night he found them. The wind was screaming. It was a whiteout. 4 hours, Alexander whispered. In this, panic, raw and blinding, seized him. The image of Lily's small, shivering body in that thin coat flashed in his mind. She had left to protect Rose. She had walked into death to save her sister from a lie. "Get the car," Alexander ordered, heading for the door, not bothering with a coat. "Sir, the roads are closed," Arthur warned. "The police aren't even driving." "I don't care about the roads," Alexander yelled, grabbing the keys to the Rolls-Royce from the bowl himself. "I am going to find them. If I have to tear this city apart brick by brick, I will find them." He burst out into the night, the wind instantly assaulting him, but he didn't feel the cold. He only felt the fire of redemption burning him alive. He had failed them once by letting a viper into their home. He would not fail them again. The engine of the Phantom roared to life, a beast waking up, and Alexander Sterling drove into the white void, praying he wasn't too late. The blizzard had transformed the city into a hostile alien landscape. The streets were no longer roads, but treacherous rivers of white drifts that swallowed light and sound alike. Inside the Rolls-Royce Phantom, the V12 engine roared, fighting against the mounting snow, pushing forward like an icebreaker in a frozen sea. Alexander Sterling gripped the leather steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. His eyes, usually scanning financial reports for microscopic errors, now scanned the blinding white void for a single trace of humanity. The wipers slashed furiously, fighting a losing battle against the sleet that pelted the windshield like gravel. "Where are you?" he screamed into the silence of the cabin, hitting the dashboard with his fist. "Think, Alexander. Think." He tried to put himself in the mind of a frightened 8-year-old girl. She had no money, no phone. She was terrified of the police. She wouldn't go to a shelter. They asked questions. She would go somewhere invisible, somewhere she had survived before. The image of their first meeting flashed in his mind. The fire hydrant, the old district near the river, the bridge. He spun the heavy car around, the tires struggling for grip before catching traction. He accelerated, ignoring the red lights that blinked uselessly at empty intersections. He drove toward the old stone bridge, a relic of the city's industrial past, where the homeless often sought refuge from the wind in the stone archways beneath. He parked the car at an angle, blocking the deserted road, and threw the door open. The wind hit him like a physical blow, knocking the breath from his lungs. It was colder now, deadly cold. "Lily Rose!" His voice was torn away by the gale the moment it left his throat. He stumbled down the snowy embankment, his expensive Italian loafers sliding uselessly on the ice. He fell, scraping his hands against the frozen gravel, ruining his suit, tearing his skin. He didn't feel it. He scrambled up and kept running toward the dark, cavernous mouth of the bridge's arch. He clicked on his phone's flashlight. The beam cut through the swirling snow. At first, he saw only trash, old newspapers, discarded bottles, piles of dirty snow. Then deep in the corner, shielded slightly by a stone pillar, he saw a lump. It was the pink coat. Alexander's heart stopped. He rushed forward, dropping to his knees in the slush. "Lily!" He reached out to touch the pink coat, but his hand met only the hard plastic of the baby carrier. He ripped the coat open. Underneath it, tucked into the carrier, was Rose. The baby was wrapped in layers of wool, topped with Lily's pink coat. She was crying, a weak, rhythmic wail. She was cold, but she was alive. But where was Lily? Alexander looked frantically around. Then he looked down. Curled around the base of the carrier, dressed only in a thin, long-sleeved t-shirt and leggings, was Lily. She had given her coat to the baby. She had used her own body as a windbreak, shielding her sister from the draft coming off the frozen river. She was blue. Her skin was a terrifying, translucent shade of waxen grey. Ice crystals had formed on her eyelashes. She wasn't shivering anymore. "No, no, no, God, no!" Alexander choked out. He scooped her up. She was stiff, her limbs heavy and unresponsive. She felt like a block of ice against his chest. He ripped off his own heavy wool suit jacket, then his cashmere vest, wrapping them frantically around her small frame. He pulled her against his body, trying to transfer his own heat into her. "I've got you," he sobbed, rocking her. "I've got you. Open your eyes. That's an order, Lily. Open your eyes." She didn't move. He grabbed the baby carrier in one hand and held Lily tight against his shoulder with the other, adrenaline giving him the strength of 10 men. He scrambled back up the embankment, slipping, falling, getting up again, driven by a primal terror he had never known. He threw them into the back of the car, cranking the heat to the maximum. He didn't wait for an ambulance. He was the ambulance. As he drove, ignoring speed limits and safety, he reached one hand into the back, grasping Lily's icy hand. "Don't you dare leave me," he whispered, tears streaming down his face, blurring the road. "You saved her. You did your job. Now let me do mine." The emergency room doors of St. Jude's Hospital burst open. Alexander Sterling, the untouchable billionaire, ran into the lobby carrying a lifeless girl, screaming for help like a madman. "I need a trauma team. Now!" Nurses froze. Security guards stepped forward and then stopped, recognizing the man beneath the blood and dirt. "Code Blue, Pediatric, Trauma 1, a doctor yelled, rushing forward. They took her from his arms. The separation felt like a physical amputation. Alexander tried to follow, but a nurse held him back. "Sir, you can't go in there. Let them work." "That's my daughter," he roared, the lie slipping out as a fundamental truth. "That is my daughter. We will do everything we can," the nurse said softly, guiding him to a plastic chair. Alexander collapsed. He put his head in his hands. He looked at his own hands, stained with mud, blood, and the grease of the city. He thought of his bank accounts, his buildings, his legacy. It was all dust. It meant nothing. If that little girl died because of a lie told in his house, he would burn it all to the ground. Hours passed. The storm outside raged on, but the hospital was quiet. Arthur arrived, silent and pale, bringing dry clothes that Alexander refused to put on. He just sat there, staring at the double doors. Finally, at 4 a.m., the doors opened. Dr. Roberts, who had been called in by the hospital staff, walked out. He looked exhausted. Alexander stood up, his legs trembling. He couldn't ask. He couldn't form the words. Dr. Roberts smiled, a tired, small smile. "She's a fighter, Alexander. I've never seen anything like it." Alexander let out a breath that sounded like a sob. "We warmed her slowly," the doctor explained. "Her core temperature was critical. She has severe frostbite on her fingers and toes, and pneumonia is a certainty. But her heart is strong. She woke up 10 minutes ago. Can I see her?" "She's asking for you." "Well, actually, she's asking if the police are there. She's terrified." Alexander brushed past the doctor. He walked into the ICU room. It was filled with machines beeping rhythmically. In the center of the bed, looking smaller than ever among the wires and tubes, was Lily. Her hands were bandaged. Her nose was red and peeling. When she saw Alexander, she shrank back into the pillows, her eyes filled with tears. "I didn't steal it," she rasped, her voice a broken whisper. "I promise. I just wanted to save Rose. Please don't let them take her." Alexander walked to the bed. He sat on the edge, heedless of the sterility of the room. He reached out and gently covered her bandaged hand with his own. "I know you didn't steal it," Alexander said, his voice thick with emotion. "I saw the video. I know everything. The bad woman, she is gone. She will never come back. She will never hurt you again." Lily blinked, a tear sliding down her cheek. "But she said you would send us away." "I was a fool," Alexander said. "I was blind, but I see now." He reached into his pocket. The music box he had bought at the airport was still there. Miraculously, it hadn't broken during his fall on the embankment. He pulled it out, a small silver carousel. "I bought this for you," he said, placing it on the tray table. "I was rushing home to give it to you when everything happened." He wound it up. A soft, tinkering melody filled the sterile room. Claire de Lune. "Lily," Alexander said, looking deep into her eyes. "You asked me to save your sister first, and I did, but you saved me. You saved me from being a cold, empty man." He reached into the inside pocket of his ruined jacket and pulled out a piece of paper. It wasn't a legal document yet, just a napkin he had written on while waiting in the lobby, but it was a promise. "I don't want you to work for me," Alexander said. "I don't want you to be a guest. I want you to be my daughter. I want to adopt you. And Rose. Legally. Forever. No one will ever be able to take you away. No police. No government. You will be Sterling's." Lily stared at him. She looked at the music box, then at the man who had driven into a blizzard to find her. "A dad?" she whispered. The word felt foreign in her mouth. "If you'll have me," Alexander said, smiling through his tears. "I'm not very good at it yet, but I'll learn." Lily moved her bandaged hand. She reached out and touched his face, wiping a smudge of dirt from his cheek. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." Alexander leaned forward and hugged her, burying his face in her hair. For the first time in years, the storm inside him was gone. Epilogue. 5 years later. The sun streamed through the massive bay windows of the Sterling mansion, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. The house was no longer silent. It was alive. In the living room, a 5-year-old girl with curly blonde hair was running in circles, wearing a superhero cape over her dress. "Rose, be careful near the piano!" Lily, now 13, sat at the grand Steinway. She was healthy, tall and radiant. Her fingers, once frostbitten and stiff, now moved across the keys with fluid grace. She was playing Chopin. Alexander sat in his favorite armchair, a newspaper on his lap, but he wasn't reading. He was watching them. His hair had a little more grey in it, and the lines around his eyes were deeper, but they were lines of laughter, not stress. Arthur walked in, carrying a tray of tea. He moved slower now, but his smile was as sharp as ever. "The adoption agency called, sir," Arthur said softly, placing the tea down. "The final paperwork for the foundation is ready. The Lily and Rose Trust for Underprivileged Children." "Thank you, Arthur," Alexander said. He looked at the mantel above the fireplace. The portrait of his late wife was still there, honored and loved. But next to it was a new picture. It was a candid shot taken in the snow. Alexander, Lily and Rose, building a snowman in the garden, their faces red with cold and joy. Lily stopped playing. She turned on the bench. "Dad, are you listening?" Alexander smiled. It was the warmest thing in the room. "Always, Lily. I'm always listening. Rose wants to go out. She says the snow is perfect." Alexander looked out the window. It was winter again. The snow was falling heavily, covering the world in white. Once the snow had been a monster. Once it had been a place of death. Now it was just a playground. "Well then," Alexander said, standing up and tossing the newspaper aside. "What are we waiting for? Get your coats, the thick ones." "I'll get the sled," Rose screamed, running for the hall. Lily paused by the piano. She looked at her father. She didn't need to say anything. The look of safety, of belonging, was enough. "Race you to the door," she challenged, a mischievous glint in her eye. "You're on," Alexander laughed. He chased his daughters into the hallway, their laughter echoing off the walls of the home that love had built, leaving the ghosts of the past out in the cold where they belonged. The end.